everyone. I think we will get started. Welcome to one of our NAPS webinars. We are thrilled that you have decided to join us today. And from what I can see, we have over 200 attendees, which is really fantastic. Thank you for being with us today. As you know, NAPS stands for North American Prodromal Synucleinopathy, REM-Sleep Behavior Disorder Consortium. So it's a really a complex acronym, but it's simple at the same time. NAPS. This is a NAPS webinar. Welcome. And my name is Videnovic. I'm a neurologist, sleep disorders and movement disorder specialist, and I work at Mass General Brigham in Boston. I am joined by my colleagues today that you may see on the screens here, and we are thrilled to present this webinar to you all today and engage in a conversation around what has this NAPS program and NAPS team achieved up to date, and to also talk about some really exciting initiatives on outreach activities that we have planned in interfacing NAPS community, NAPS research community with the general public and our broader patient community. I would like to start with some technical housekeeping information. This webinar will last for 60 minutes. We will record this webinar, and we plan to have it posted for all of those individuals who couldn't join us today. We'd like this to be a resource for our RBD community. You will have an opportunity to ask questions, and some of you have already submitted great questions in advance of this webinar. To do that, you would please use Q&A function of this Zoom platform, and you can type in your questions, and hopefully we will be able to answer them during the live Q&A session. Those questions that we do not get to, we will make sure we answer them and post them via our website. Today's webinar has a few segments. Let's call them segments. Initially, you will hear from Dr. Gus Davis, who will tell you about where the NAPS program is at the present time and provide overall update on the program. Subsequently, you will hear from Dr. John Elliott, who will really highlight some of the publications and scientific update and our presence at the various meetings and conferences where NAPS has participated. Both of these elements, progress presented by Gus and updates on the science that has been presented, that John will feature, really could not be done without you all. And we are really so happy that NAPS is at that point in its evolution where you can really see how you all, many of you, have contributed to advances in the clinical care research on RBD. And finally, the third segment will be moderated by Leah Taylor. And we have here Caron and John Poma, who are our community engagement board representatives. More about that to come. And they will have a lovely panel that we put together for you. And finally, as the fourth segment, we will have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar where we will entertain any of your questions. So just to use our time wisely, I am going to ask each of our speakers to briefly introduce themselves before they start with their segments. And I'm turning the podium now to Dr. Davis. So please go ahead, take it away.
All right. Well, thanks, Alex, and thanks everyone for joining this webinar. I'll just echo what Alex said. We're thrilled that everyone is attending today, and I have to say, none of this would be possible without the incredible dedication and participation of the participants and families and loved ones who really do make up the heart and soul of the NAPS Consortium. I just came this morning from a participant visit with someone who's been in the consortium, been a participant in the consortium now for going on 6 or 7 years, I think. So this is a testament to how committed everyone is. My name is Gus Davis. I am a movement disorders neurologist here at Washington University in St. Louis, and I work closely with the WashU team here, as well as mainly with the biofluid core for the NAPS consortium. I see patients in the clinic with Parkinson's disease and dementia with Lewy bodies and related conditions, and have a basic science lab in addition to the work that I do with NAPS and other clinical research projects. So I think I'll pause there. Alex, I don't know who you wanted to go next. Maybe John.
Why don't we just head with your presentation, and at the beginning of each presentations, we can ask you to introduce.
Oh, I see. All right. Excellent. All right, let's see. So, Brian, did you indicate you wanted each of us to share our own slides?
Yes, please.
All right, let's see if I can get that to work. How does that look?
Great.
All right, so that's full screen for the webinar audience?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Hope so. Okay, terrific. All right, so I have the privilege today of going over some of the NAPS study updates. I'm going to see if I can get if I can make this a laser pointer. Maybe not. Can people on the webinar see my cursor that's moving?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, I might use that to highlight a few things as we go. The cursor will do just as well. So I wanted to give some really high-level updates. There's so much going on in the study and the consortium that it's impossible to cover everything, but I want to try to set an overview for what the consortium really is all about for those who may not be as familiar, and then some highlights of the main activities that we're focused on and have been so far, and also some of the priorities for future directions. And then this will segue hopefully nicely into some more detailed updates on some of the publications and manuscripts and the findings for the NAPS Consortium that John Elliott will talk about next. So I wanted to begin, as Alex mentioned, this is a complicated concept that's kind of rolled into this acronym of NAPS, which is North American Prodromal Synucleinopathy. But there are some other acronyms that many in this audience I know are going to be familiar with this, but just in case there are those who don't, I may refer to some of these. So I want to be sure we're all on the same page. So first, RBD stands for REM, which is Rapid Eye Movement Sleep Behavior Disorder. And so this is the sleep disorder that's characterized by symptoms of dream enactment. And it can be an early sign of specific neurodegenerative diseases, but it can also have other causes. And I've listed some of these here. So the point is, this is a complex landscape, and it's important to be as specific as we can be and to get as much information as possible to help guide diagnosis and management. As I mentioned, RBD is often a prodromal condition, meaning it comes before things like Parkinson's disease or dementia with Lewy bodies or multiple system atrophy. All of these are related. I'll say more about how in just a moment. But one important thing to note is that not all dream enactment necessarily is RBD. So it really takes a careful evaluation with a neurologist often, including a polysomnogram or a PSG. That's a sleep study that can make the diagnosis of REM sleep behavior disorder in the right context of the clinical history, based on findings that are seen on the sleep study. So this often requires specialized equipment and specialty medical providers, but it's important to be as accurate as possible. So these illnesses that RBD is often a precursor for we call them synucleinopathies, and that's one term that's in the acronym for NAPS. That's the S in NAPS. Synucleinopathies are a group of neurodegenerative diseases. Included in that is Parkinson's disease, dementia with Lewy bodies, and multiple system atrophy. The common thread is that all of those are defined by abnormal aggregation of a brain protein called alpha-synuclein. That's the protein that clumps into Lewy bodies, and that's associated with cell death and dysfunction in brain circuits. There's another term that's important, which is phenoconversion. This is a term that we use to describe the phenomenon when an individual goes from having only REM sleep behavior disorder or RBD, but does not have symptoms of Parkinson's disease or dementia with Lewy bodies or multiple system atrophy. Phenoconversion is the phenomenon of progression from having only the RBD to having overt symptoms, just meaning that those are plain and obvious and that would meet a diagnosis of either PD or DLB or MSA. And then finally, I know this is a busy slide. I apologize for starting with a wall of words right out of the gate, but I think it's important to be clear about these, and I'm happy to go back if others have questions. But the last term that I want to define is a biomarker. So a biomarker is a surrogate result. So it stands in for symptoms or a disease process. This can be any number of things. It can be a genetic test result or a molecule that we measure in blood or spinal fluid or an imaging test, something that we use to either help diagnose or predict the prognosis or measure a treatment response for a specific illness. So one of the main goals of NAPS is to try to develop biomarkers for RBD and progression to synucleinopathies. All right, so that's a lot. The main mission of NAPS is really to enable successful clinical trials for treatments against synucleinopathies. So we know that RBD is a prodromal synucleinopathy. Individuals who have RBD are at risk of developing synucleinopathies. We need neuroprotective clinical trials that will interrupt that process and prevent or delay the development of synucleinopathies. And there are a lot of barriers logistically and scientifically to get from the problem that we've all identified to solutions. So that's really the main mission of the NAPS Consortium, is to try to break down these barriers. So the NAPS Consortium is composed of multiple sites, 9 that are in the US and Canada. This consortium was started in 2018 and has been funded by the National Institutes of Health, a partnership between the National Institute on Aging and the National Institute of Neurologic Disease and Stroke. Funded initially by one exploratory grant mechanism, and then more recently by a traditional 5-year grant mechanism. And we also have been fortunate to receive research funding from the Michael J. Fox Foundation. Here's the link to the address for the website and details about the registry on clinicaltrials.gov. None of this work could go on without the support from the NIH, and so we're very grateful to the program officers and leadership at NIH for backing this effort and for partnering with us in that. As you can see, the sites that are here, there's a lot that's behind the scenes in terms of sample processing and distribution, imaging repositories, and other partners and collaborators. here. So again, another text-heavy slide, but this is really I think the least painful way to get all of the study aims out onto the table. So what is the purpose of NAPS? Specifically, NAPS 2 is the 5-year phase of the consortium study that we're in now. So what are we doing here? What is the purpose of this? There are, broadly speaking, there are 6 aims. I'm not going to read all of the words here, but I want to touch on a few things. Some of these are self-explanatory, but I think it helps to make them clear. So aim 1 is to conduct research on REM sleep behavior disorder as a prodromal manifestation of synucleinopathies, so to do the work. The second aim is to expand the cohort of participants so that we can grow this study so that it's representative of the population and that we can draw meaningful conclusions. The third aim is to analyze the data that we're collecting and develop scales and biomarkers to eventually optimize design of clinical trials that will come hopefully soon that will be aimed at slowing down the progression and preventing development of synucleinopathies. Aim 4 is to share what we're collecting and learning with the broader scientific community. Aim 5 is to interact with the NIH and other funding partners and scientific groups, industry partners, patients, and the community in general on issues that are related to these conditions and this research. And then perhaps most importantly, aim 6 is to prepare for large-scale clinical trials that will test the effectiveness of disease-modifying therapies to slow down these illnesses. The next set of slides has a fair amount of data. I'm not going to go through all of but I want to hit highlights to show the progress of what we've done, where we've come so far. So in terms of total enrollment, we're now at more than 400 total participants in the consortium. That's a combination of participants that were enrolled in the original iteration of what we call NAPS 1. Many of those continued on into the current 5-year study, and then we've enrolled additional participants beyond that. The NAPS consortium is structured around annual follow-up visits, and so we are now at over 1,600 total clinical visits from all of the participants in the study. So this is really the power of a study like this, is that we're building detailed knowledge of the longitudinal characteristics of how RBD progresses. In terms of biofluid collection samples, the 2 main biofluids that we're collecting are blood biospecimens that we're collecting are blood and CSF, and we now have in the repository more than 1,500 unique blood specimens and more than 300 CSF or cerebrous spinal fluid samples, which is really remarkable, and it's a testament to the dedication of all of the participants in the consortium. Additional biomarkers that we're collecting include imaging studies. Those are mainly composed of MRI and DAT scans, as well as polysomnogram, distinct, that's the sleep study component. So you can see the numbers here. So this has been really a detailed collection and characterization of these important biomarkers as well. One thing that's very, very exciting, and I imagine that there are probably some attendees for the webinar today who are familiar with, or maybe even a part of the NAPS registry, the outpouring of interest for individuals who either have or think they may have or know someone who has RBD has been really phenomenal. And just by the design of the trial and the space available, not everyone is able to be enrolled in the consortium as it is currently. But it's really been tremendously encouraging to see the outpouring of interest. So we have a registry here. I put the web link here. This is a registry for people who, individuals who either have or think they may have RBD, to express interest in learning more about RBD research, specifically through the NAPS Consortium. And that registry now has more than 2,500 individuals who have expressed interest. So this is really, really wonderful to see that there's ongoing and continued interest. All right, I have two more slides, and then I'm going to wrap up and turn it over to John. There are some important future directions. We've made good progress, but this is obviously far from complete. So things that we're focused on doing now are continuing longitudinal clinical evaluations and biomarker collection. In particular, we know that we need to increase the collection of cerebrospinal fluid samples by lumbar puncture. So if that's something that people have considered but may have been reluctant to do, please talk to the NAPS investigator at your site, and we can answer questions and help explain what's involved in that. Another important thing is to publish manuscripts reporting the key findings from the study, and this is well underway, and John Elliott is going to talk a bit more about that. We've developed a tool that's called the Prodromal Synucleinopathy Rating Scale, or the PSRS. So the vision of this is to be a standardized clinical tool. John Elliott will probably talk more about it, but to analyze the performance of this rating scale along with the biomarker signatures so that we can better assess longitudinal change and especially predict phenoconversion for individuals who have RBD. Next, we're continuing efforts to coordinate with the NIH, which is our main funding agency and partner, along with the FNIH, Foundation for NIH, that coordinates and supports many related activities related to this research and other areas. Partnering with other academic laboratories, philanthropic foundations, industry partners, all with the goal of advancing this research so that we can get to clinical trials and test disease-modifying therapies as soon as possible. And then importantly, expanding our outreach and community engagement efforts so that we can be open and willing partners with patients and families and advocates in this space. So as I mentioned, we're in a 5-year phase of this research that's supported by the National Institutes of Health. We anticipate submitting the application for the next 5 years of funding for NAPS soon, within the next year or so. So this is going to be a busy time within the consortium as we plan for what's next. I want to mention some of the ongoing projects. I'm going to touch at a high level on these. I imagine John Elliott will probably go into more detail, but one item that Brad Beauvais, one of the principal investigators of the NAPS Consortium, and many others have led is the development of this PSRS, or Prodromal Synucleinopathy Rating Scale. So this is a comprehensive tool for assessing the various symptoms that can develop in individuals with RBD, cognitive symptoms, motor and autonomic, both the type of those symptoms as well as the burden. We're hopeful that this will be a useful tool that might have applicability and utility for other groups outside the NAPS Consortium. So we're excited about that. One obvious thing is to continue our analysis of longitudinal progression and phenoconversion. There's multiple biomarker projects that are ongoing. To understand how do we relate those to clinical features, relationship with other biomarkers, and phenoconversion prediction. And then we know that there's a important genetic contribution to all of this, and so this is work that's ongoing with analysis and partnership with larger genetics consortia for Parkinson's disease and related illnesses. So I think I'll stop there, and I'll. Alex, are we taking questions now, or should we
Thank you. Thank you, Gus. Really appreciate it. I think, to get us going, I'm going to turn the podium now to John Elliott. And after his talk, we will probably take a few questions and then move to our panel discussion. So, Gus, thanks so much. John, look forward to hearing you.
Great. Thank you, too. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, so as I get going, how does that look to everyone? Full screen?
It's good.
Great, thanks. Um, so my name is John Elliott. I am a PhD scientist at Oregon Health Science University, participating in the NAPS Consortium. And I would just echo everyone's comments so far for the appreciation and gratitude to everyone participating, all of our participants, including uh, the fleet or kind of the army of individuals at each site that really make everything happen. So there's a lot of people behind the scenes, sort of serving as boots on the ground, keeping these studies moving and visits going, and that's it's a big undertaking. So big thank you to everyone. I'll try to keep this tight. I've got 9 publications to cover in 10 minutes. So um, here we go. I'll go through these in chronological order relative to when they were published. The one that's out of order here is the first one, the study protocol paper. Um, this one, the North American, so the NAPS study, this is a protocol for our multi-site longitudinal observational study of RBD, published just recently actually in Sleep Advances in 2026. The reason though this is coming first is that this is the protocol paper. So this is a paper that is designed to present the clinical trial in really deep context. So it really goes into depth in terms of all of the different participating sites, the different clinical batteries, the different clinical assessments. As Gus kind of mentioned, some of the polysomnogram measures, neuroimaging, biospecimen collections, among others. And so there's pros and cons to these types of papers coming out at the onset of a study versus sort of midway or whether or after it's evolved and kind of been refined. And the benefit of this one now coming out in 2026 is that we have had a chance for the overall NAPS consortium and study process to be refined and matured a little bit. So this is at this point we have 500 plus participants, as Gus alluded to already, across the U.S. and Canada, and future papers should be able to cite this one and keep their methods section a little bit briefer. Okay, so moving actually back to the first paper that came out of NAPS, this was our baseline characteristics study, published in Annals of Clinical and Translational Neurology in 2023. We actually had the idea for this came from an investigator meeting in 2019. I volunteered to spearhead this effort, and over the next several years, there was a global pandemic that ensued, among other things, that led to the analysis and reanalysis of this study several times, where it finally came out in 2023 with on cross section including 361 participants. So this was largely or really exclusively NAPS1 participants. Um, the goal of this was to highlight all of the major clinical domains in one study, but at kind of a high level. So we report, cognitive, motor, autonomic, and sleep outcomes, to name a few that just kind of again at a high level, serving as a foundation for subsequent studies to then extend from and provide a more deeper analysis of individual domains or individual constructs. Um, the takeaway here is that the majority, 84% of participants that came through NAPS1 had measurable neurologic abnormalities in at least one domain, meaning motor, cognitive, autonomic, or otherwise. Um, there were no differences in sex effects that we saw, and kind of a high prevalence of other comorbid sleep disorders. So really, again, the take home is that there's a high prevalence of subtle neurologic abnormalities associated with RBD, and that this is, not just a pre-symptomatic state. This is something that should expect some degree of abnormality. So with the goal of extending some of the different domains, we explored a little more deeper into the autonomic outcomes, and published a paper on the frequency of orthostatic hypotension in RBD within NAPS. And I'll describe a little bit about what this is. This was in Neurology in 2023, so shortly after the baseline paper. Again, NAPS1. So here we have 340 participants screened, and 27% or somewhere around 92 or so participants met criteria for orthostatic hypotension. And this is our main objective autonomic test to evaluate blood pressure regulation. So participants go from supine, laying down, to standing, and the fall in blood pressure is either defended, increased, or not. And if it isn't adequately defended, it stays low, and that's sort of a example of orthostatic, so standing low blood pressure. Um, the the other interesting part about this study was that the majority of these individuals also met criteria for neurologic, having this become from a neurologic origin. So in this case, the cardiovascular response, the increase in heart rate, was inadequate to maintain blood pressure. So it's quite common and should be probably part of routine screening associated with RBD. After this, next up is a validation study for the RBD symptom severity scale, the RBD-SSS. This came out in Neurology in 2024. This was a pretty standard validation study. So this is there's a lot of kind of, I guess it depends on your opinion here, but dry statistics in terms of describing the concordance between different measures and psychometric analyses. But it's a really important measure. The field hasn't had something like this to validate RBD symptom severity and be able to track how that severity from a subjective perspective evolves over time. So this is a sort of the first paper that says this is a validated measure. This can be applied, and it does show strong concordance between participants, their bed partner, clinician-rated scales, and very strong consistency and construct validity across the different items. So excited to have this one part of our battery here. Following that was a paper published in Sleep in 2024. This one, a little bit longer title, Comorbid Neurotrauma Increases Neurodegenerative Relevant Cognitive Motor and Autonomic Dysfunction in Participants with RBD. So briefly here, what do we mean by neurotrauma? This is participants with traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, TBI and PTSD. Previous work has shown that there may be an increased rate of RBD associated with these types of neurotrauma. The question is whether or not this RBD that's present with their neurotrauma reflects, true idiopathic RBD, conferring some neurodegenerative risk, or if it's somehow different. And so we took a cross-sectional approach. We said, let's take a case control analysis. So one case, meaning one participant with TBI and PTSD relative to 4 controls without that neurotrauma, match them for age, sex, education, kind of these key criteria for the different outcomes that we're looking for. And we showed that those with RBD and neurotrauma reported an earlier age of RBD symptom onset, more severe RBD symptom severity, greater subjective sleep impairment, and importantly, worse cognitive, motor, and autonomic function. And so, again, this is cross-sectional. We don't have longitudinal data yet. That's forthcoming. But it does sort of suggest the possibility that this phenotype might be associated with an advanced neurologic progression, or conversely, functional resilience to actual phenoconversion. We don't know if the longitudinal data are moving forward. Okay, next on the list, 6 out of 9 here, cognitive, motor, and autonomic function among individuals with serotonergic versus isolated RBD. This is a paper by Aniha Reddy and Mike Howell, published in Sleep 2024. So most of us are probably familiar with the association between antidepressants. SSRIs, this is a type of antidepressant that can trigger or worsen RBD symptom severity in people. It's still a little unknown and controversial in the field whether or not this serotonergic or antidepressant associated RBD confers the same risk for eventual phenoconversion, or if it's more of an association and maybe unmasking these symptoms. So of the 294 participants, this study looked at, around 7% met criteria for having antidepressant associated RBD. But interestingly, they found a pretty similar profile. So the 2 different groups had similar cognitive, motor, autonomic profiles, kind of challenging the assumption that antidepressant associated RBD is purely a pharmacologic side effect. There may be a neurodegenerative significance here. We don't know yet. Again, this was cross-sectional. This is an important and evolving question in the field. Okay, I'm doing so okay on time-ish. 7 out of 9, we have this is actually a comment published in Lancet Neurology on a review of a perspective piece. There was two papers that came out kind of in tandem. This comment was on the Simuni et al. Paper, Lancet Neurology 2024. They both present kind of in a different fashion a biologic framework for defining and diagnosing Parkinson's, DLB, and other synuclein pathology based on actual pathology, based on synuclein pathology and biomarkers, moving away from a clinical diagnosis. So the comment that we addressed here was to simply voice that that this type of biologic-only framework risks misclassifying or excluding prodromal patients, such as those with RBD, who may very well be on a neurodegenerative trajectory, but not yet meet these biomarker thresholds. And so there's a chance that if we move to a biologic definition, these patient-centered perspectives could be sort of sidelined, clinical phenotyping not as important, and then the diverse presentations seen in real-world RBD populations not adequately reflected. So we're asking for caution, broader stakeholder input, and sort of at least a kind of a pump the brakes a little bit. Let's examine maybe a balance between these two different frameworks for the time being. But again, an important and evolving topic in the field. Here we have another paper. This is titled IGLON5, Frequency in Idiopathic RBD, Neurology, Neuroimmunology, and Neuroinflammation 2024. This was a systematic first-in-cohort autoimmune screen. So the ones that we screened for were IGLON5, DPPX, LGI1, and CASPR2, acronyms that we don't need to go into right now. But those were the screening immune disorders. And we had 3 participants that were confirmed positive for IGLON5, which interestingly can present with a phenotype very similar to RBD, including dream enactment, cognitive, autonomic, motor symptoms. So although it's rare, less than 1% prevalence or frequency, this is a potentially treatable disorder that can closely mimic synucleinopathy. So the clinical identification of this is important, and if we can intervene early, we should do so. So we're advocating for early screening for these, especially in cases that are atypical or rapidly progressing. And then last but not least is the Prodromal Synucleinopathy Rating Scale. This was talked about, Gus already covered this a little bit, and I don't have a lot more to add to that, Gus, but this was published in Neurology just this year recently. It's still in press, so I don't have data to share. I'm just going to throw up here the rating scale, the grid here, where we have the different domains of interest: cognitive, behavioral, psychiatric, motor, both appendicular and then through gait, axial, autonomic, sleep, and sensory. They have a different range of scores, 0 through 4 or 0 through 2, and the sum score reflects a composite of each of these different domains. And so the goal of this was to, again, validate this PSRS as a tool to quantify disease burden across time, across domains, to be able to then track across time and correlate with the biomarker and imaging analyses that we're doing in NAPS. So again, not surprisingly, evolving, important, but really exciting scale to be a part of here. So a quick summary, but I'm gonna skip over this for the interest of time and just acknowledge the fact that we have a broad presence at international conferences. This is just a sampling that I was able to collate pretty quickly here across from 2021 to 2026, and lots of ongoing work. And so I'm happy to scroll through this if we want to or have time, or if you want to, you can go to our website, find the NAPS data specimen request, and scroll through yourself. There's a lot of exciting work happening at this point in time. So at this point, I'll stop. And
thank you. Thank you so much, John. Really appreciate this great overview, and hopefully to all of you, this is really illustrative of the magnitude of work that has been taking place in collaboration with you. None of this could have been done if you really did not decide to join, participate, donate your time, spend your time, and we really are very grateful for that. It is already 12:44. We have received a number of questions, and I'd like to make a few comments. We intend to collect all of these questions and answer them. And we also are recording this webinar, and we will post this webinar's recording on the NAPS website. It is our intention also to get to these questions and put a document that will provide answers to these questions, because we just really have that very important segment about the community engagement board that is ahead of us. So I just want to make sure that you also understand that all of these papers and links to these papers, we will make sure that they are also published on the website so that you can access, that you can have access to these papers. Important initiatives that we have developed over the past several months is creation of our NAPS Consortium Community Engagement Board. This board is initially composed of a diverse group of participants and advocates who are committed to shaping research that reflects real-life experiences with REM sleep behavior disorder. And the purpose of this group that initially has 9 members with lived experiences and professional expertise relevant to these disorders is to bridge the gap between the researchers and community, to amplify participants' voices in study design and priorities, and to promote transparent inclusion and trust between us researchers and clinicians and our patients' community. And in the spirit of highlighting the very important work that Community Engagement Board has been starting to do, we have invited 2 of the inaugural board member participants, Caron and John Poma, to join Leah Taylor in a panel conversation. So I invite you to enjoy this conversation. Please send your questions in, and we will try to answer as many questions as we can, and even can stay longer for after 1 p.m. local time here on the East Coast to answer some of these questions. So Leah, Caron, John, go ahead, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Leah Taylor, a program coordinator at Washington University in St. Louis, and I work with Dr. Yoel Ju, who is one of our principal investigators. And I'm really glad to be here to help facilitate the discussion today. I just want to start by thanking both John and Caron for joining us today and for your willingness to share your experience. We're really grateful to have your voice included in this conversation. So to start, could you tell us a little bit about your journey with REM sleep behavior disorder? Start with Caron, please.
Sure. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this. I'm really excited. My RBD journey started roughly about 7 years ago, and it started with what my husband described as blood-curdling screams in the middle of the night. And it was quite distressing to hear, and it sounded like someone was being murdered. It was so intense and scary. At first, it was quite infrequent and random, and so I just chalked it off as wild dreams. But then over time, the frequency increased, and it was also accompanied by flailing my arms, kicking, trying to jump out of bed. And it's when I was finally hurt and injured from jumping out of bed twice and being bruised along half my body. The bruising and the screams must have left neighbors wondering what was going on in our home. But anyway, I went for a sleep study, and that's when I was diagnosed with RBD. And I joined the NAPS 2 study during that time. And 2 years into the study, I phenoconverted to Parkinson's. And I'll just leave it at that for now. I'll pass it on to you, John.
Thanks, Karen. So we have a little bit of a similar story. I'm John Poma. I'm from Richmond, Virginia. I first joined the NAPS community, I guess, in 2020. So I vividly remember the first RBD event. So it's a little bit different than Karen. I don't remember any of the loud vocalizations or other symptoms. My first experience was attacking my wife in the middle of the night, and vividly remember as a pivotal moment. It was almost 8 years ago. In the middle of my sleep, I have a dream, and I, just physically attack her. She goes flying off the bed, hits the nightstand, black eye. When I sort of came to, she's asking me what happened, and I'm asking what happened. And we didn't really think that much of it at first. The next day, she goes, "You must be under more stress than you realize at work." And I don't think so. Or say I went through a 6 month period where we really don't remember much. She used to say, "I think you have restless leg syndrome." There was another pivotal event where I then attack her again. And she goes, either something you're not telling me or you need to go get help. There's something wrong. So this was all happening towards the end of 2019. I had my sleep study at the beginning of 2020, was diagnosed just before COVID. My first NAPS visit was supposed to be March 13th of 2020, which of course never happened. So I was, beginning with the understanding of what is RBD. I didn't really first recognize it as being a neurological disease, but it did really get intertwined with the anxiety and the stress of COVID. Like Karen, I guess it was about 4.5 years after the RBD diagnosis, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and for a good part of that time, I think the RBD symptoms and PD symptoms are sometimes hard for me to separate. They do seem to be intertwined. And as time has gone on, the RBD symptoms have progressed. I've recently been in one of the worst cycles, that I've been in, not, resistant to medication. Just a couple weeks ago, another incident of falling, not falling out of bed, just really falling out of bed. And so I've gone through cycles where it seems to be okay, and then it gets worse, but it has progressively gotten worse over time.
Thank you for those answers. So I'm just in the interest of time, I'm going to fast forward a little bit and talk about some of the things that have affected, in what ways that has RBD most affected your daily life or your sleep, and either one can answer.
Well, I've become quite sleep obsessed, and I wake up every morning and ask my husband, did I have any episodes? Did I talk in my sleep? Did I hurt anybody or scream out? And unlike John, fortunately, my RBD symptoms have gotten better or have mellowed over time. And so it's been a little bit less concerning for me. But I still do have the episodes, and it really does affect my energy levels, my fatigue. So if I have a more intense RBD dream, I wake up feeling really, really exhausted and tired, as if I've been fighting aliens all night. And in my mind, I have been. But with my dreams being tamer now and more mellow through the use of different lifestyle modifications and the supplements I'm on, it's converted more to vocalization. So instead of physically acting out, I am giving lectures in my sleep, giving presentations. I'm recently retired, so I used to give a lot of presentations, and I worked with people with brain injuries. And in some of my dreams, I've even been having psychotherapy sessions with my clients. So thankfully, I'm retired now, because otherwise I'd be breaching confidentiality. So my dreams have gotten tamer, and I'm focusing on the lifestyle modifications to help stabilize my life management with RBD.
And John, that kind of flows nicely with the next question. What have you found most helpful in managing your RBD? So if it's treatments, routines, or safety adjustments, Karen, you addressed that well. What about you, John?
It's been all of the above. So in terms of, I'll start with safety, and I said this began with COVID. We've been real innovative and creative in how we've tried to protect our sleep environment. I've sometimes will use a slide of our bedroom in a presentation. So during COVID, I was checking that at Lowe's behind a plexiglass shield, and I had the idea of, you know what? And we have an adjustable king bed, so it's it's like two kings. So I bought a plexiglass shield. I bought the foam insulation piping that you use for round pipes, put that around the plexiglass shield. Last thing we do before we go to bed is we stick that in between, in between us at night. The recommendation was you probably should no longer sleep together because my wife had been hurt. I guess I was 53, 54 when it first started. Wasn't ready for that. So it's unusual if people see it, sort of like hiding behind the dresser. What is that? But it's been very helpful because if I do have, an attack, I hit the plexiglass shield. I don't hit her. She also had the idea of making like a sleep stack. I call it like a potato sack, but can put that on so it prevents me from kicking. I can only kick, through that sack. That's been sleep. In terms of life, I was never much of a gym goer. Before RBD and Parkinson's, but my life and my routine revolves around exercise. I'm very protective of it. I make sure that my work schedule permits it. And we also often talk about the challenges, of RBD. I mean, the other thing, for me, the way it's impacted my life, it's an oxymoron to say that I feel lucky, but it has been a way for me. I work in healthcare. I support physicians every day as a part of a multi-specialty group. I'm in-house counsel, but it's really amplified. I became involved as a patient advocate, so it's really important to me to amplify education awareness. I've become involved with the Parkinson's Foundation in numerous ways to help provide education and awareness and support to patients. So it's become a big part of my life in a positive way also.
Okay, thank you. So from your perspective, what are the biggest priorities for researchers, clinicians, and patient communities as we work together to better understand and treat RBD?
Well, I think education and awareness is really key because when I was first diagnosed, my physicians didn't know much about RBD. No one was able to direct me to information or resources. I had to figure out stuff on my own. And people that I talk to have never heard about RBD. So I think an education and awareness campaign for the general public, for the medical community, and in general is a really important part of it so that we can engage in early identification of people with RBD. Because the sooner you can identify it, the more people can begin lifestyle modification to hopefully avert progression of the disease or maybe even reverse neural degeneration, because the goal is to find ways to not just manage, but to prevent phenol conversion to neurodegeneration.
Okay. And John, this is the final question. What message or advice would you share with someone who has just been diagnosed with RBD or with their care partner?
So I think first, as we've talked about before, that some of the anxiety that you experience, the unsettledness, it's all very natural, and it is a part of the disease. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's a part of our lived experience, with RBD. But the other thing that I really encourage folks is that as unsettling as it may be, as much of an emotional toll that it may take, try to give yourself grace, and I say try to find the humor in it. Try to laugh at yourself because it is unsettling. But I think if you can find that humor, give yourself grace, have a positive outlook. Again, I work in healthcare. I think having that positive outlook, always, helps and helps with outcomes. And I told just a quick story. We had we're right next to our master in our house is a guest bedroom, and we had guests who spent the night, and I had one of those blood-curdling screams that Caron talked about, and I yelled, "Call the police, get out of the house, call the police, call the police." And my wife is yelling, "No, cancel that, and it's embarrassing. You have, guests over, but the next morning you laugh at it, I have no idea what they're thinking at the moment, but do truly, try to find the humor, laugh at yourself, and give yourself grace.
Well, thank you so much, you guys, for sharing your story and your insights. It's incredibly valuable and will resonate with so many of our community. Again, we really appreciate your time and willingness to be a part of this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, I certainly second that on behalf of our NAPS community. Thank you everything that you do for the Community Engagement Board. We really hope that in months and years to come, this Community Engagement Board will grow. There will be many opportunities for many of you who may be interested to join and contribute to bridge that gap between what this disease is, educate the general public, help even healthcare providers understand this condition better as we try to educate and advocate for this disorder. We are at the top of the hour. I'd like to share with you that we almost have 100 questions and comments. This has been terrific to have such a great engagement with you on the other side of this virtual podium. Many comments about Caron and John, and one that stood out to me says, "Thank you, John and Caron. Wow, so similar to perhaps some of the 200 people here. I don't feel so alone." Such a really great comment. And again, what I'd like to say, we will record the webinar, we will post the webinar, we will try to answer all of your questions. And what we will do, since we recognize that we probably didn't budget enough time, that is a good lesson for us for the future, we will stay a little bit longer in attempt to answer at least some of these questions. And I understand that many of you may not be available to do that, but hope this panel can stay maybe for 10, 15 minutes longer as we go through some of these questions. There is a question that came and that commented on availability of a clinical trials that will are there available trials? How do we go about it? And I will just briefly answer that question. That we are finally at that point in this story where there are initial clinical trials coming our way. There will be one clinical study that will start relatively soon that will be organized by the Parkinson's Study Group. Many of the NAPS sites will participate in this study. And in this clinical trial, we will utilize a drug that will target our immune system, actually immune system of our patients with REM sleep behavior disorder. And this drug has been used to treat inflammatory bowel disease and to treat some other autoimmune conditions. And we will make sure to share the news on our NAPS social media platforms. But you can also reach out to your respective NAPS sites. Many of them will participate in this clinical trial. And there will be other opportunities, for example, PPMI study. Some of you have questions about the PPMI supported by the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's disease. They are spearheading a series of clinical trials which will focus on delaying the progression of RBD into one of these neurodegenerative disorders. So we have arrived, and finally we will start seeing more and more of these clinical trials, and we'll make sure that we educate this community about this. So let's see some of the questions here that I can see. One question said, "I found that alcohol drinking rarely affects RBD." John, Gus, would you like to make a brief comment about this?
About effect of alcohol on intake on RBD?
Yes.
I think I would answer that broadly by saying two things. There is an interaction between alcohol consumption and symptoms of multiple neurologic conditions, and so I think in general moderation is important as a part of an overall healthy balanced life. It's not clear to me whether the whether the comment was about worsening or an improvement of RBD symptoms. But regardless, worsening. So I think that's the way I would approach that is absolutely our diet, things like alcohol, exercise, multiple different lifestyle factors do have impact on neurologic symptoms. So that includes RBD. So I think the best recommendation that I could give is to pay attention to lifestyle factors that impact symptoms, and discuss specifically with the physician to make a safe plan for symptom management.
If I might add to the notion about exercise, since I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, I've joined something called Rocksteady Boxing, and it's an intensive exercise program 3 times a week. And what I've been delighted to see is some recent research around the impact, the effects of high intensity exercise 3 times a week at 85% heart rate intensity has shown not just stalling of symptoms, but reversal of neurodegeneration based on DAT scans and MRIs. And so if there could be something similar for people with RBD, I think it could really have a positive impact. I had to have Parkinson's to join Rocksteady Boxing, but there could be a Rocksteady Boxing for RBD.
Right, great idea. There is a question that I think it's really important, and I'd like to address it with this audience. As a patient who is in the registry, how can I follow NAPS if I'm not selected to participate in the study? And this is really important, and I just would like to, first of all, thank you all who joined the registry. We do have RBD registry, and we do have a NAPS research study. NAPS research study is capped at the 300 participants at any given time. Why is that? Simply because that is the support that we received, funding that we have to conduct these very intense assessments, and this is the support that we have. But we are thrilled that you are part of the registry, and we are actively thinking how to derive projects and involve RBD registrants in some activities that can inform both clinical care and research. And I am certain that in the next iteration of this NAPS funding, which should be coming soon, we are very soon need to start preparing for the next application to receive additional funding, then continue our work. We are thinking very carefully how to engage with the RBD members of the RBD registry, and so that you feel you are more included in any of the activities that NAPS Consortium is dedicated to. So please hang in there. I know you may feel a little bit marginalized. You are such an important partner with us, and we did not forget about you. We include you in these webinars, and we hope to include you more in the day-to-day operations of our consortium. So a lot of questions about the personal situations, right? Which really, these webinars are really not the greatest to address these personal situations. Somebody said, I've been diagnosed with the RBD. I don't think the diagnosis is right. What should I do? So John, what would your recommendation be in that case if we have questions about the diagnosis that we received?
Me or John Poma?
John Elliott. How about that? But John Poma can join too. We have 2 Johns. Sorry.
Questions about diagnosis that we should. I would probably want to defer to maybe Gus or you, Alex, for that one. I apologize. Not being a clinician.
What you need to do, you need to find a sleep specialist who is knowledgeable about the RBD. It's a really simple question. You need a sleep expertise here to diagnose the RBD appropriately. And John, how do you feel about that, being on the patient side of the story in terms of when it comes to the diagnosis?
No, I can't agree more. So initially, when I first had symptoms, we have physicians in the family, physician friends, and I sort of went on Dr. Google and diagnosed myself initially, and and I was told I was crazy. It's not RBD, it's something else. And when it turned out to be RBD, I found my way to a sleep neurologist at VCU, and she has been instrumental in helping me navigate my REM sleep behavior disorder. She's been a support. She's who got me involved on the ABIM Sleep Advisory Council. So it's really important to find a physician who you trust, and finding a sleep expert is really important because you need someone who's familiar with RBD. So few physicians are, a lot of primary care doctors aren't. So I agree completely. Find your way to a physician who specializes in sleep medicine, sleep neurology, and they're in the best position to help.
Thank you. Gus, how close are we to using blood/saliva instead of CSF in the seed amplification assay?
I would say closer than we were, even closer than we were, say, 5 years ago. Uh, I know that answer sounds a little evasive. Another important point that I think needs to be made is that we are not there yet. Either knowing how we can use blood or saliva, or really what is the best approach to integrate all of the information that we get from biomarkers, whether they're from blood or spinal fluid, imaging, genetics. All of this is not as clear cut as we would hope. So this has been a process. Our consortium and many other groups are working toward that. Obviously, diagnostic tests that don't involve something that's invasive, like a lumbar puncture or even a skin biopsy, are certainly attractive. And so we're closer than we were, but it's not ready for prime time yet.
The next question is, where can I find the PSRS? That's that rating scale that we've been developing to review it. The manuscript with the instructions behind this scale is now in the process of getting through the final publication, and it is our intention that we will post this tool, this scale, on our website as soon as that publication process is complete. Are there similar studies like NAPS in Europe? We do have international RBD study group, which brings group of clinicians and scientists worldwide together. And I know that there are really efforts to create a similar consortia in Europe. As a matter of fact, these consortia already exist. For example, France has the consortium. Italian colleagues have also developed their consortium. So there are these national efforts in Europe across many countries where patients are being organized in these registries, and international RBD study groups together brings us together, all of these different groups, and we actually have annual meeting, and which is really a great opportunity to interface and learn from each other. So it's 1:12. I just want to be respectful of everyone's time. Most of you stayed with us during this Q&A session, which has been terrific. In closure, thank you for being part of NAPS community. Whether you are a NAPS study participant, whether you are RBD registrant, whether you are a member of the community engagement board, whether you join us as a physician, scientist, whether you come from a general public. We are really thrilled that you managed to join us today. we feel there is need to have this maybe a little bit more regularly than what we used in the past. We'll discuss this internally. Look for the recording of this webinar on our website. And finally, I'd like to thank very much to all of the panelists for a great presentation and reflections. Be well, and I hope we'll talk again soon as the group. So thanks very much for joining. Be well. Bye-bye.